When I spoke the other day about Boris Johnson leaving the Channel 4 coverage of the US election and Krishnan Guru Murthy saying that he had been fired, various comments were pasted beneath saying, "You've not said anything about Emily Maitlis." Emily Maitlis is, of course, the person who famously interviewed Prince Andrew. And Boris Johnson's participation in the Channel 4 coverage alongside Emily Maitlis and Krishnan Guru Murthy should have been a very interesting... Well, it was an interesting lineup. I didn't watch all of it, watched a little bit of it, and the energy surrounding his appearance, given for his unpredictability and his flair, and there was this clash, the interaction between Johnson and Maitlis, the clash focusing on this point where she pressed him on a potential political comeback, and Johnson deftly redirected the viewer to his book Unleashed, and Emily Maitlis then said the audience wouldn't necessarily read the book, underscoring her frustration with his Evasion. Krishnan Guru Murthy made an on-air remark afterwards that Johnson had been fired for plugging his memoir, and he said in the Daily Mail instead that he'd left to catch a flight. And he then pointed out that Emily Maitlis had a gradual descent into madness. Oh, and he reported, he said her outburst as the election results rolled in was insanity, craziness, madness. It's there's a point when Stormy Daniels asked Johnson if he would leave his daughter with Donald Trump, and Johnson's initial response and his subsequent more nuanced clarification in his column. So Johnson likes to think about an answer. He will give one answer in one situation and then give another answer after he's thought about it. But that impulsive thing, which of course led him to write two articles about Brexit, one leaving Brexit, one staying in the UK, not going for Brexit. And Johnson has accused the Channel 4 of bias, of stunt-like coverage, drawing a parallel to his past experience with Ian Katz in 2004. And, I suppose there's a reason why he might be reluctant to talk about his political aspirations, because his entire approach to politics is about ambiguity, and his nuanced and sort of carefully thought ideas in the Daily Mail put him in in a bracket with Oscar Wilde, really. Oscar Wilde, who did these sort of calculated spur of the moment responses, which of course were all scripted. And when the train was delayed once, and somebody says, "Oh, do you have anything more to say?" And he said, "No, because he's run out of script." And whether you write the script or whether it's written for you, the issue about Boris Johnson is that he needs to think before he responds. He's not quite as spontaneous, quite as clever as he likes to imply. And he has this patina of showmanship where he treads a tightrope between political gravitas and self-promotion. And sometimes that tightrope, that line, blurs, or sometimes it breaks. And that idiosyncratic mix of charm, he doesn't do it as well as his father. That's all I can say. His father has charm oozing, as Henry Higgins says, oozing out of every pore. He oiled his way across the floor. And Johnson doesn't have that. Johnson can turn it on and can turn it off. but it isn't a perpetual flood of charm, unlike Stanley. I remember that the last, not the last election, but the one before that, I spent the election night in the green room for a lot of the time with Stanley Johnson and Boris Johnson's sister. The latter I don't particularly like. I've never really liked her, and she was quite rude to me in the green room. But her father was an absolute darling, and I know there are people who say how horrible Johnson's father is, but I can say with my hand on my heart, I spent 5 hours of unadulterated pleasure with this man who had endless stories, who was charming, erudite, pithy, and even Rory Stewart couldn't quite come up to the joy of Stanley Johnson. But I don't think Boris has that. He's never quite had that. I knew Boris years and years ago. I don't really know him now. And I think Boris is a strange chameleon who makes decisions about his personality. I think for Johnson father it comes naturally. For Johnson's son it's a decision. Bah, I'm being charming. Bah, I'm being intelligent. Bah, I'm being political. Bah, I'm looking for vulnerability. And it's that decisiveness. Johnson Jr. is a calculator. Johnson Sr. just does it. And I think that that element of calculation, that element of rethinking, that element of l'esprit d'escalier, what I could have said, what I should have said, and Johnson will then rewrite the story so that he is actually saying what he should have said at the moment because he's not quite fast enough to get there, not quite charming enough, and his mind isn't quite in the moment. His mind is always lagging behind or thinking ahead. He's never quite in the moment, unlike his father, who is always absolutely there. I know which one I prefer.